Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, May the 6th, 2025. Today there is a semisquare between the Sun and Neptune. Additionally, Mercury is on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. I regard this as being quite important, and in the last part of the video I want to look at Sun semisquare Neptune and Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint in some detail. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, May the 6th. And, if appropriate, don't forget to like and subscribe, because it does make a difference. So anyway, let's have a look at what's happening today. So that is a chart that I don't really want to look at right now. I want to look at the chart for Tuesday, today, May the 6th, set for New York, and the moon is in Virgo. And so you can see moon is at 10 degrees Virgo. So all day long we have the moon in this sign, sort of moon in an earth sign. And we can say the usual things about moon in Virgo. It's relatively materialistic. It perhaps notices things. It can be quite sensitive, moon in Virgo. Moon in Virgo can be sensitive, for example, to pollutants and things which may undermine one's health. And so with moon in Virgo, be aware of what could upset your balance. And if you feel something's not right, then do something about it. That is okay. Now, the moon in Virgo is not actually making any aspects. It's not making any major aspects, that is, to traditional planets. It is applying to a trine of the Sun. That aspect is very real, but it's not really going to be exact today. If you're in the Americas, then towards the end of the day you're going to feel that moon trine Sun in all its power and all its glory, but it's perhaps going to be quite a subtle influence, though it is good that the moon is in Virgo, Sun is in Taurus. Both the Sun and the moon are in earth signs. They do have this wide aspect to one another, and so that does create a feeling of being together and being at one with ourselves and being at one with the rest of the world. The masculine and the feminine are nicely balanced with that trine between the moon and the Sun. So okay, it may not be exact, but it's probably something we do have to consider about today. Now, as far as other aspects are concerned, well, the headline aspect is a semisquare between the Sun and Neptune. There is the Sun, 1622 Taurus at noon New York time, and there is Neptune at 1 degree 16. So they are Neptune at 1 degree 16. So they are 45 degrees apart. So I regard the 45 degree aspect as important. They are semisquare. And when you have the two planets in semisquare to one another, there is a dynamism there. And the Sun represents ourself, potentially, how we apply ourselves in a positive way, but Neptune can undermine it. We may find ourselves having to deal with things which we don't fully understand. That's one way in which Sun semisquare Neptune can work. It can also, on a positive note, Sun square Neptune can be very aware of broader trends. We know what people want. So if you want to give people what they want, and you've got Sun semisquare Neptune, you just have a good understanding of changing trends, and you can perhaps satisfy your audience or your customers. So there is certainly a positive sense to Sun semisquare Neptune, but it can also be deceptive. We can hide who we are, what we intend, and that can be useful, but it can be a problem. We don't want to push that too far. And for ourselves, we just might get confused with Sun square Neptune. We might actually misunderstand what people want. So I've said that Sun semisquare Neptune could have a good understanding of one's public, but it could also be a disastrous understanding of one's public. Maybe one focuses on one group of people and thinks that that group of people represent the whole, and one might be wrong. So you could say, from a statistical perspective, that is poor sampling. Just because you talk to one person or two people or three people doesn't mean that that's the whole population. And that's what we often do. We find that a couple of people have the same opinion, and then we make the assumption about everyone, and that can lead us into trouble. Also, the Sun makes a decile to Jupiter. So there is the Sun and the Sun making a decile to Jupiter. So Sun decile Jupiter is about what we are struggling to project. And so Sun decile Jupiter may indicate that we have a vision. That's Jupiter. We have a vision, and we want to project it out there onto the world in which we live. But it's hard work. Just because we've got a vision doesn't mean that we can manifest this vision. And so it's a struggle to manifest that vision. But can it be a struggle that is successful? I would have said yes. Through sheer willpower, we can make our vision clear and we can create change. But we are going to need a certain amount of willpower. But maybe we're going to be helped, at least in the charisma stakes, with a sextile between Venus and Pluto. So there's Venus in early Aries making a sextile to Pluto. So Venus sextile Pluto can be quite charming, can be a little bit deceptive, but we know what we need to do to get other people onto our side. But of course, it works both ways. That Venus sextile Pluto may represent another person, and you have to look at how people behave. Maybe they're very clever. They could be a little bit manipulative with Venus sextile Pluto. But it's a good aspect, Venus sextile Pluto. And Venus is not just about relationships. Venus is about art and presentation and what looks good. And so Venus sextile Pluto, we can maybe create something that is dramatic and transformative, and we can create something in terms of what we look like, how we choose to dress. So that is a way in which Venus sextile Pluto could work. So that is the broad picture. Oh, one other thing. The Mercury is conjunct the Sun-Neptune midpoint. Now, I'm going to go into this in greater detail later in the video, but it's an important midpoint. And the reason it's an important midpoint is because the Sun and Neptune are already in 45-degree aspect. Okay, so they're in 45-degree aspect. So if Mercury is in the middle, that means that Mercury is approximately 22.5 degrees from the Sun and 22.5 degrees from Neptune. Now you might think, well, 22.5 degrees, so what? Well, 22.5 degrees is actually 1/16 of the circle. So it's the next stage down. So you go opposition is 0, conjunction is 0, opposition is 180, then you go down to the square, which is 90, then the semisquare is 45, and then the semisquare is 22.5. So that Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint is important. In fact, it's a 16th harmonic conjunction. So let me just quickly show you what a 16th harmonic conjunction looks like. So let's just change this. So when I say a 16th harmonic conjunction, so it's like if you've got waves. Each wave is 1/16 of a circle. You can calculate the 16th harmonic by reducing the positions of the planets to absolute longitude. Remember absolute longitude. So the absolute longitude of Taurus is 30 degrees. Of Aquarius is 300 degrees. So you convert everything to absolute longitude. You multiply by 16, and then you successively reduce 300. You successively subtract 360 until your figure is below 360, and then you convert to the signs. I'm sorry, that may not make much sense, but I'm just informing you that there is a process. So if you look at the 16th harmonic for today, if we, again, I'm multiplying everything by 16 using the mathematical process I've just described, you can see that Sun, Mercury and Neptune are making a conjunction. In other words, a 16th harmonic conjunction. And I do think that is important. And there might be a spiritual side to it, and some of us might be incredibly sensitive in a good way, but we could also be incredibly confused. And this might be a day when there's a lot of lying. People are struggling to say something, they want us to believe things, and yeah, there could be a bit of deception and make-belief today. So that's the position of the planets from the viewpoint of New York, and just quickly looking at it from an Australian perspective, Australia, New Zealand. As I said, I did read the comments. If you are in Australia, and I know that you're perhaps not happy about the fact that I haven't looked at the Australian elections yet, and my apologies. I do plan on looking at those elections, but the problem I have is that firstly, I don't have a great feel for the Australian political system, or not the political system so much, but the dynamics in Australia, and also the main candidates. For example, Anthony Albanese. I don't think I have a time of birth for him, and I don't have a time of birth for the leader of the opposition. I can't even remember his name, which that shows that I don't have an immediate feel for it. I mean, I can look this up, but not having a time of birth means there's a limit to what I can say, and if I don't have a general view of what's going on in the country, that may make it difficult for me. But I'm going to try. I mean, don't worry. But anyway, this is a position for Sydney, Australia, and so the moon is at 3 degrees Virgo. So yeah, the moon might be in late Leo, very early in the day, in the middle of the night, before dawn, but wherever you are, whether you're in Australia or New Zealand or Kamchatka, the moon is going to be in Virgo pretty much all day long. And I don't think there's a great deal of difference between today, whether it's in Australia or the United States. Okay, the moon trine the sun, which I was talking about when looking at the chart for New York, is a lot wider. I mean, it's 12 degrees apart, but still, the moon is in Virgo, sun is in Taurus, so there is a trine relationship between the sun and the moon. And then there is the heliocentric chart. Here it is, and the heliocentric chart, just remember, this has the Earth the sun at the center of it, and heliocentrically the Earth is still making a sextile to Mars. It's not exact, but with that sextile to Mars, it allows us to assert ourselves in a fairly gentle way. So if we want to make progress, if we want to get things done, then that Earth sextile Mars may facilitate it. Additionally, we have got Venus starting to make a sextile to Mars. Now, that Venus sextile Mars, probably going to be exact tomorrow, but it's pretty close. It's within 1 degree. And so with Venus square Mars heliocentrically, Venus Mars is about attraction and repulsion, and it's about how people get on, and it can be about finding people attractive, and it can also be about finding people repulsive. Sorry, that sounds a bit bad, but the Venus Mars energy is very particular. People with strong Venus Mars contacts in their charts are often attractive to a certain group of people, and to another group of people they are not attractive. So it kind of depends. And so, with that Venus square Mars, if you are trying to impress anyone, to get anyone onto your side, ask yourself who are you dealing with, and how should you present yourself? Because the first method that comes to mind, it may work with some people, but may not work with everyone. But still, the issue of attraction and repulsion could today be actually quite important. So I think that's the main thing going on heliocentrically. I don't think there's much else to report. I mean, the Earth, by the way, is making a Earth is making a square to Mercury. So Earth is making a sextile to Mars, square to Mercury. So, Earth square Mercury. Well, the message is important, and the message was important with Venus square Mars. So it's not just the message that's important, it is how the message is packaged. So let me now consider the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, May the 6th, 2025. Aries. Aries, you may feel that things aren't moving quite as quickly as they used to be. At least, compared to yesterday or the day before. Yeah, things might be slower. And so you mustn't be in so much of a hurry. If you want to get something done, your first priority should be to make sure that it's done properly, and that may require some concentration, some hard work, and also making sure that the details are all taken care of. And that is because the moon is in Virgo, and so don't feel that you need to get immediate results. And the moon in Virgo, it doesn't make any aspects really. I mean, it does eventually make a trine to the sun, but that's pretty late in the day. So it may feel, Aries, that you are putting a lot of effort into something, but you're not really getting any results. And that could be frustrating. But what it might be is a case of the thermometer not working, or the gauge not working. So it's like there's an indicator of your progress, and that's how you work out how far you're going. But the gauge is not working. So in fact, you may be making excellent progress, but you just can't see it. You don't see any results. So keep going, and because you're getting no response doesn't mean that nothing is happening. Additionally, Aries, you may find that if you try to do something large scale, that you actually start to get really frustrated. So if you try to do something over the top, and if you try to be a typical Aries, you might just get really annoyed, and you might feel that this is an indicator of the way things are going, and you might get quite upset about it. If things are this difficult today, well, that must indicate that things really are bad. But don't jump to conclusions. Today is not a measure of everything. It's just one day. It's just a Tuesday. And looking at relationships, we've just been looking at the heliocentric chart, and in the heliocentric chart there is a square between Venus and Mars, and I do think that this Venus square Mars might have an impact on you. if you are working with other people, if you have to work with other people, I mean, it's not an especially sociable day, but if you are, then do consider how you come across, because if you come across in the wrong way, that might put people off. And indeed, if you feel that you can't come over in the right way, if you feel stressed out, on edge, and then maybe you should keep your distance, because I do think relationships could be difficult, unless you find the right person. As I said at the beginning of this video, it is all about attraction and repulsion. That Venus square Mars, well, not at the beginning of this video, when I was talking about that Venus square Mars heliocentrically, it can be one or the other, and so it may depend who you're dealing with. Some people might think you're absolutely wonderful, and maybe you know who these people are, but other people might not find you impressive at all. So maybe you should choose your audience carefully. But if you don't know, maybe you should just be modest and careful and not make assumptions, and then things should be okay. But Aries, I'm sorry to be a bit down in terms of what's happening today, but it's just a Tuesday, and okay, we might see a similar picture tomorrow, Wednesday, but later in the week, things are going to improve. Taurus, you're feeling quite good. I think you feel that things are happening, things are moving, and you're probably feeling a little more positive than yesterday, and you're helped by the fact that the moon is now moving through Virgo. The moon doesn't do a great deal in Virgo. It's not making any aspects. Okay, it makes, maybe if you're in the Americas, it starts to make a trine to the sun at the end of the day, but with the moon in that position, not making any aspects, that might just mean that Taurus, that you have a fair amount of freedom. You can do, by and large, what you want. There shouldn't be too much resistance, and if you want to do something just because you feel like it, then go ahead. And when you're not under pressure, you're going to be able to achieve some really good stuff, and you're going to be able to demonstrate to yourself that you are a very talented and clever person, and that should make you feel good about yourself. And the moon in Virgo does eventually make a trine to the sun in Taurus. Now, that trine to the sun in Taurus, okay, you may not feel it to the end of the end. You may not feel it until the end of the day, but as the day progresses, that moon trine sun is getting stronger. And when you're dealing with moon trine sun, it's a harmonious influence. So, as the day progresses, there'll be a slow feeling that you're more and more in tune with whatever is happening around you, and so that is going to make you feel comfortable. And additionally, another aspect we've got is Venus sextile Pluto, and Venus sextile Pluto may actually make you quite charming and charismatic, and if you want to get people onto your side, you'll know what to say, you'll know what to do, and you'll know how to present yourself. And you actually could come over as someone who is quite attractive, and so that's really going to help. So don't dismiss the possibilities for social interaction and interpersonal interaction, because it does seem that you very much have something that other people may want. And additionally, you don't have to make a big fuss about it. Venus, your ruler, it's in Aries, but it's in a pretty low-profile sector of your chart. It's in the sort of 12th house, you could say, because Aries is a sign before Taurus. So there is an argument for understatement. You can understate your charms and your attractiveness, and in that way you may actually be boosting yourself, and you'll perhaps give the impression that you've got really something to offer, and there may even be a little bit of a sense of mystery about you. So from a social and relationship perspective, I do think that things look pretty good today. And additionally, some Taurians may be able to benefit from government and authority. So if you have anything to do with government departments or officers of the government, or you have to deal with the government, when I say government, I'm talking government at all levels, central government, local government, city government, whatever government you have to deal with. I suppose if you're in the UK, that might be the parish council, but that's at a pretty low level, isn't it? Do they still have parish councils now? And so whatever that level of government is important to you, and so that is a potential benefit. So don't be afraid of the government. And if you have to interact with the government or a municipality, you may actually be surprisingly successful. So that means that if you have any position of authority, especially if you work for the government, you don't have to work for the government to be able to benefit, but if you have any position of authority, I think you're going to be able to leverage that position, and you will give the impression of knowing what you're doing. And also, when you're talking about rules and laws and government in general, you can come over as being quite benevolent. And I don't know whether you see yourself as being benevolent, but you can actually be a sort of a benevolent leader if you have that chance. So people are going to like the way you present any authority that you might have. Gemini, you probably feel that it's a day when you don't necessarily want to put your head above the parapet. I mean, who knows what might happen? You've said your bit, and do you need to say anything else? And do you really want to take risks? And I think that approach certainly has its advantages. And if you try too hard to have an influence, it may not work. Though we shouldn't forget that Mercury is still making a sextile to Jupiter. Mercury is at 23, 24 Aries. Jupiter is at 22, 23 Gemini. So that means that you do continue to benefit from that Mercury-Jupiter sextile. And with that Mercury sextile Jupiter, if you make the effort to get on with people, you can do really well. And if you want to sort of present ideas or just present yourself, I think that you'll come over as the right person for the right moment. So that is your potential, but then there's a question of what you feel like doing, and I think that many Geminis may feel that they just don't want to do anything, and so they might want to just batten down the hatches even. So with this Mercury sextile Jupiter, I would advise you not to be too cautious. If you've got a set of social skills, then you should put yourself in a position where you can use them, but at the same time you can be aware of your limitations. Now, additionally, one of the main midpoint aspects we've got today, which I will be talking about later in this video, is that Mercury is conjunct the Sun-Neptune midpoint. And you can see this by eye. There's Mercury in Aries. It's in between the Sun and Neptune. And it's more than that, because Mercury is making a 22.5-degree aspect to the Sun. It's making a 22.5-degree aspect of Neptune. It's making 16th harmonic conjunctions to the Sun and to the Neptune. And I do think that this is going to have an influence on you. And, despite your best efforts, you may find yourself getting confused. It may be very difficult to understand what is going on. And you can try talking to people, and you can listen to them, and you can take notes. But however hard you listen to another person, it's just another person, and you may be getting an edited account of reality, or you may just be hearing a pack of lies. And we shouldn't forget that some Geminis can be very effective liars. I mean, I'm a terrible liar. Lying, I just can't do lies. Maybe that's because I've got a Sun in Taurus. Sorry, because I'm a Gemini with Sun in Taurus, with Taurus rising, and so lying is not really something I really understand. I'm just I remember at school, when I was caught doing something wrong, I would find it very difficult to lie, unless I really had to lie. If I really saw I had to lie, I can do it, but it's not pleasant. But many Geminis are excellent liars, and so with Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, there may be opportunities to be economical with the truth. And some Geminis may even enjoy lying. Maybe telling a lie is more interesting than telling the truth. But you don't want to get caught up in your lies. And it's not just about lies, it's about misunderstandings. So if you misunderstand something, then you might want to stick with this misunderstanding because it feels good. There is a bias towards two possibilities, two interpretations of the truth. The interpretation which feels best, but you might be kidding yourself. So do be careful there, and also be careful with what you say. You may think you're telling the truth, you may think you know the facts, but it's absolutely possible you don't, that you're exaggerating, or there are key details that you have misunderstood. And it does potentially work both ways. When you hear something, you may regard it as the truth, when in fact it's not the truth at all. It may just be satire. And that can be a problem. Of course, nowadays people have a problem with satire, don't they? Now you're supposed to, if you write something which you don't mean, on social media or on Reddit or something, you're supposed to put /s at the end, just to make it absolutely clear that it is satire. In the old days, you didn't put that /s. You would assume that other people would naturally understand. Does that mean people are becoming less intelligent as time goes on? Maybe it's the plastics. I heard, by the way, talking about plastics and intelligence, I heard this figure which I find really distressing. It really upset me. Apparently, every one of us has 3 bottle caps of plastic in our brains. I mean, literally 3 bottle caps. So you imagine what a bottle cap is. And I mean, it's not large, but you imagine 3 bottle caps of plastic in your brain. And I find that really disturbing. In my brain, there's 3 bottle caps of plastic. Maybe in your brain as well. I mean, I don't want to scare you, but it scared me when I heard that. I found that really, really distressing. So maybe that explains why we have to put /s on everything. Maybe people are becoming less intelligent because of all the plastics in our brain. At least that is a possibility. So sorry, I'm rambling. So what I'm saying is that you have to be careful about the truth and don't take things at face value. Maybe I shouldn't be taking things at face value when someone tells me there are 3 bottle caps of plastic in everyone's brain. Maybe I'm just kidding myself to think that. and they should have put /s at the end of that, and I've missed that. So be a little careful there. Although Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, on a more positive note, it can be quite spiritual, and it can be, you can be in tune to something higher than yourself. And so probably the best way of dealing with Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint would be to not feel that you have to act on your thoughts. You hear something, you believe something, you feel something, that's great, but it may be true, it may not be true. I just let it rest for a few days, and then you may be able to have another look at things, and things will seem different, perhaps. Maybe by the end of a week. And finally, the moon is making a trine to the sun. Okay, that trine to the sun is not exact today, but it might be exact at the very end of the day if you're in the Americas. But that moon trine sun is saying that as the day progresses, Gemini, you don't have to do anything, and if you just relax and do something without much consequence, much significance, and then things should be fine, and you might end the day feeling quite centered and feeling quite good about yourself, and you'll perhaps be very pleased that you didn't make up your mind about anything. Cancer, you're feeling okay. Things are moving quite smoothly, but I don't think that today is going to be especially momentous, and that's probably something you want to hear. Why would you want a momentous day? You just want a day when everything is running relatively smoothly, when there isn't much in the way of pressure, and if you want to do something, you can do it. If you don't want to do it, well, you just don't have to do it, and that's fine. And so Cancer, don't feel pressured, and don't feel obliged. Though I think that your ability to talk and to get on with people is going to be very good, and there could be lots of fairly meaningless conversations which may be good in terms of creating links between yourself and other people, but conversations that aren't really going anywhere. And it might be a great day for small talk, telling everyone that you're still alive, that you exist. But there's nothing that you absolutely have to do if you don't want to. And so that to my mind looks pretty good. And the moon does eventually make a trine to the sun. Now that trine to the sun is possibly not going to happen until tomorrow, early tomorrow, but might be late this evening if you're in the Americas. And the moon trine sun, that is about integrity, feeling at one with yourself, and also feeling one with the people around you. It's just comfortable. So if you want a quiet day, then I think you can very much have this kind of day. I think it really can work out. And I think the lack of drama is going to appeal to you. Though if you do find yourself with other people and talking to other people, don't feel that you have to accept what anyone tells you. You may be told things that sound interesting, but that doesn't mean that they're right. Some people are feeling unsure of themselves, but they want to feel sure of themselves, so they might make bold claims as a kind of a reaction adjustment. They make a bold claim because it makes them feel good, but actually there's no substance to this claim. So if you find people talking in capital letters, bold words. Don't necessarily believe what they're saying, because there is an ability to make poor decisions. If you have to make decisions today, with Mercury is on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, if particularly decisions about business or your career, if you feel you want to make those kind of decisions, then I would suggest you don't, because you don't have all the information. No one has all the information, and you don't know how things are going to pan out. And that's perhaps, Cancer, just another reason why today you should feel that you don't have to do anything. You certainly don't have to decide anything. Leo, like yesterday, you're not feeling especially sociable, and your ability to get on with people, especially on an emotional level, is probably not going to be great. And that's nothing to worry about, by the way. You have to sort of understand your strengths and your weaknesses. And so you could, if you try too hard, it's still not going to work. And so, look at the people around you, be aware of them, but don't feel you have to get close to anyone. And even the closest relationships could be difficult. And it just may be that at some level you are keeping something to yourself. And if that's the way you feel, that's the way you feel. This is just a reading for Tuesday. Wednesday is a different matter. And additionally, Leo, we have a semisquare between the Sun and Neptune. Now, this semisquare between the Sun and Neptune, 45 degrees apart, it's a dynamic aspect. This aspect, it is probably not going to be helpful. I mean, you think about it logically. The Sun, you are the Sun. Sun rules Leo, and it's semisquare Neptune. Neptune is in Aries. It's nice that it's in a fire sign, but Neptune can represent all sorts of confusions and moving in different directions, not knowing which way to go, and trying hard. You might have an idea. This looks like a good idea. Let's go for this. And you go for it, and it doesn't work out, and you might get fooled. You might get distracted. And there could be mirages in the desert, which could lead you in a direction that ultimately you don't want to go in. So this Sun square Neptune means that you do need to stick to the path. And if something looks good, then it's probably is just an illusion. And this would especially be the case, by the way, if you're working today or doing anything connected with your ambitions or trying to improve your status. Stick to what you know. That is really important. And ignore things which seem glamorous, which seem to offer the opportunity of fast gains, or watch out for those shiny things. They look very attractive, but who knows what happens if you pick them up. So stay firm, and I think that is something you absolutely can do. Stick to the path you've set for yourself, and remember that Leo is a fixed sign, and if you do that, then I think that today should be absolutely fine. The moon, by the way, is moving through Virgo. Moon moving through Virgo, it may be that there could be a few concerns about money, or thoughts about money, not necessarily concerns. And at first, money might not be something that you especially want to deal with. But the moon is actually making a trine to the sun. And so far in this reading for Leo, I've been a bit negative, but that moon trine the sun is good news, and it becomes exact, this evening if you're in the Americas. It's going to be tomorrow if you're elsewhere. But when that moon trine sun becomes exact, it feels that something is coming together, and it could be that something is coming together in a material way. It could be about money, it could be about work, and through all the chaos, and there is a lot of chaos today, not just for you but for everyone. Through all the chaos, that moon trine the sun is going to allow you to stay with it, and by staying with it, you will in the end see what's true and what can really be trusted. So if you are persistent and you don't allow your imagination to get out of control, then I think today should be great. Virgo moon still in your sign, and moon doesn't actually make any aspects today. Okay, maybe very end of the day the moon makes a trine to the sun, but it's not really doing a lot, the moon in Virgo, and that might be a good thing. You can just be yourself, and whatever you're doing, you're going to feel that you're in the right place, and that's always important. If you're a Virgo, and if you're familiar with a place, with a particular environment, then everything should be okay. And so if you follow the plan, I can't see where the problems lie. I can't see, but Mercury is your ruler, and Mercury is on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. And Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint can be a problem. I will be talking about Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint later in the video. But Mercury is you. If it's conjunct the Sun-Neptune midpoint, there are possibilities here that you might get confused. You think you know something and you don't know it. And so be very skeptical today when you hear something, when you read something. Yeah, it's not necessarily true. And additionally, Virgo, you might have some worries that just crop up. And when you start worrying about something, the worry might intensify, and one worry leads to another worry, and that might in the end start to get in the way of your concentration. And so what I would suggest is that you don't allow worries to get in your way, and you don't feed your worries. One good way to feed the worry is to try to find out more and more about the topic of your concern, and you just keep going and you find more and more information, and then you get wrapped up in it, and in the end you don't know what you're doing. And it could be about overthinking something. It also could be about overfeeling something, getting trapped in one particular emotion, and you stay on that emotion, and that emotion gets out of control. So maybe you should be giving yourself a little bit of variety, and also stability. And stability is something you can find, and that is because the moon is making a trine to the sun. Now, to begin with, that moon trine sun may not be very noticeable. At noon New York time, the moon is 6 degrees away from the sun. If you're in Sydney, Australia, it will be even further away from the sun. But it's moving slowly towards the sun, the moon is. So that moon trine sun is going to give you not just grounding, but it's going to give you support, and it's going to allow you to get in touch with something that is supportive of you. Now, that might be some higher being, or some feeling that the universe is looking after you with that moon trine sun. Or it may just be that you start to get a sense of direction that is real and that is positive and is optimistic, but without being fanciful. So you've got to make the distinction there. With Mercury on a Sun-Neptune midpoint, you could go in the wrong direction. You could get caught up in all sorts of fantasies. But on the other hand, moon trine sun is asking you to look at what is real. And Virgo, I think that as the day progresses, you can understand. You'll start to understand what's important, and you can find that you have something that you can believe in, that you can actually trust, and that will, in the end, look after you. And finally, I should say that on a positive note, because I have been a little bit down in this Virgo reading, is that Mercury is still making a sextile to Jupiter. Okay, that Mercury sextile Jupiter was exact yesterday, but it's still there. Mercury is at where's Mercury? Mercury is at 24 Aries. Jupiter's at 23 Gemini. Mercury is moving away from Jupiter, but it's still there. And that Mercury sextile Jupiter allows you to have a fundamental belief in yourself, and also that that everything is going to be okay. And in a real sense, Mercury sextile Jupiter may mean that, in a sort of grounded sense, in a grounded sense, that may mean that if you are working today, then with a bit of effort, you can get to grips with the things with the things that really matter. And it may be that your feelings which they could trip you up, your feelings could easily trip you up, but not necessarily. If you actually make an effort to find the truth and ground it in something real, then maybe you can have some important revelations about what actually you can do in a practical sense at work, in your career, in business. So that's one way in which a Mercury sextile Jupiter could be working. Mercury sextile Jupiter is also a great aspect for relationships, and so if you're realistic and you don't allow yourself to be blown off course, then relationships should work very well. Just don't believe what anyone says. It's not about trust. You can't have a relationship that's based on trust. It has to be, what do they say? It's quite a common term at the moment, a trustless transaction. So you have a transaction where you don't need trust. And if you can have a trustless transaction with another person, then that relationship, it can be very satisfactory, and it can be mutually beneficial. Libra, Venus is making a sextile to Pluto, and this Venus sextile Pluto is quite a good aspect, and sextiles tend to be fortunate. And with this Venus sextile Pluto, you're able to have an influence, and people are going to listen to you, and they'll take you seriously, and it might give you a certain amount of gravitas, but also you give the impression that you maybe have something that other people don't have. And so Libra, do try your hardest with other people, and don't think that they're not listening to you. And as soon as you start to interact with them, as soon as the wheels go into gear, then you will start to inevitably have some kind of influence. And you may also find that you have a degree of power, and that power may come from your knowledge and your authority. Now, you may not see yourself as being much of an authority figure, but you can be. And if you've got any authority, then now is a time to be using that authority and to be showing what you know, what you can do, but you're someone who can give good advice, and you will find that people will listen to you. And one reason people might listen to you is because at the moment there's a lot of uncertainty around. And I've just talked about the Sun making a semisquare to Neptune. Now that Sun semisquare Neptune doesn't affect you directly, but it is saying something about the world in which you're living. And a lot of people are very unsure of themselves. And Libra, you might be just the person to provide some kind of clarity. And you know things, you know the way people work, you know the way organizations work, and perhaps you can get things to sort themselves out, and perhaps you can additionally give some good advice. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, relationships are important at the moment, all things being equal. Venus is in Aries, Venus is in your opposite sign, and of course Venus is your ruler, and Venus is sextile Pluto. So at the very least, with Venus sextile Pluto, you know how to get people to take note of you. Yet heliocentrically, there is a square between Venus and Mars. Now, that Venus square Mars, in one sense, could actually improve relationships. It may allow you and another person to be in touch with each other. But Venus can be a little bit disturbed by Mars. I don't think it's Mars being disturbed by Venus. It's Venus being disturbed by Mars heliocentrically. And so it could be something quite ascetic. Not everyone is going to be to your taste. Not everyone is going to be on your wavelength. Some people, you may not find them attractive. And that may be part of the experience of today, dealing with different people and just realizing that some people you don't actually want to deal with because they upset your Libran balance. And, if that is the case, you have to decide on the best approach. It may be that you're picking up on something, that you're picking up that someone is bad for you. It could be something passing. Just because someone seems unappealing on first meeting doesn't mean that is what they're really like. And maybe you have to give another person a chance. So just because a new contact, a meeting with a new person doesn't go well, and perhaps it's just your emotional reaction, you shouldn't read too much into that necessarily. So try to be open-minded and try to see people as whole human beings, and not get sort of distracted by the aesthetics of their appearance. Scorpio, you regard the world maybe with a bit of distaste. You can see what's wrong with everything, and you can also just see how things at some level are just falling apart, and you know it. And this is kind of something you've been feeling for some time, and the more you see, the more evident it is. And the dereliction is obvious, and the decay is obvious, and you're almost wondering, how long can this last for? Just because something has been in decay doesn't mean it's going to go, doesn't mean it's suddenly going to die. I mean, it could be that you had noticed that something was falling apart months, even years ago, and it's just still there, but it's still in this state of dilapidation. And that just could be the society in which you're living in, but it may just color the whole way you see things, the whole way you go through the day. But it needn't be too much of a problem. It's just a reminder of what things are like. And as far as other people are concerned, the moon is moving through Virgo. It's starting to make a trine to the sun. I mean, that is an aspect which allows you to get on with most people, at least on a superficial level. That moon trine sun, it's an aspect that is probably not going to be exact today. Okay, it could be exact later in the evening if you're in the Americas, but you can get on with most people if you want to, if you make the effort. But try to keep it at a fairly light level. You don't want to really get too close to anyone, especially as heliocentrically Venus is sextile Mars. Sorry, Venus is square Mars. So we've got a heliocentric Venus square Mars. And this heliocentric square may be about the impression you are giving. You may be trying your hardest, but you might still give the wrong impression. And not everyone is going to react well to you, especially if you get right up close to them. So if you feel it's important to get close to anyone, maybe you should put that on hold for a day or two. This Venus square Mars just could be a bit of a problem, and you therefore have to perhaps think about what other people want and what other people can handle. Because if you just present yourself in your raw form, then that might not go down well in some quarters, not all quarters. But you just have to remember that relationships, they're a complicated thing, and people can get all sorts of impressions. I mean, relationships of all kinds, by the way. So, don't feel that you absolutely have to get close to anyone. You have a little bit of a distance. I think that really would be helpful. And at the same time, yes, you are able to create an impact today. I mean, heliocentrically, we've still got the Earth sextile Mars. So if there's anything you want to do, if you want to make something happen, and if you're at one with the cosmos, then you can certainly make it happen. So it's not a time to be lazy. It's just that you don't have to worry too much about bringing other people with you. Perhaps you just need to, at least to begin with, act as a lone operator. If something needs to happen, you can make it happen. And the social dimension is there, but I think by and large, Scorpio, it should be secondary. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, I think it's going to be, quite a pleasant day. I think that most things should go your way. They can go your way quite substantially if you make the effort. And I'm saying that because the Sun is making a decile aspect to Jupiter. So Sun and Jupiter are 36 degrees apart, and Sun, Jupiter are therefore 1/10 of a circle away from one another. And so it talks about struggle, and it is the struggle to establish yourself on your environment, and you have an idea about how you would like to establish yourself. And at first it seems to be a bit of a theory, and the question is, can you turn theory into practice? And the answer is yes, you can turn theory into practice with this Sun, Decile, Jupiter. And you need to have, the strength of your will. You can will it to happen. You want to establish yourself. Even so, if to begin with, you don't feel that things are happening, you don't feel that people are receptive to you, you shouldn't take that as being something set in stone. It's not set in stone at all. And if you really want something to happen and you put in the effort, then you can really make a very powerful impression. And at the same time, the moon is making a trine to the sun. Got the moon in Virgo, making a trine to the sun. That moon in Virgo does matter. Virgo is a mutable sign. It's a mutable sign like Sagittarius. So Virgo, with that mutability, Virgo and Sagittarius have a connection with one another. And so with that moon in Virgo, you are able to present yourself and also organize yourself with moon trine sun. Moon trine sun, they are in earth signs, and you're able to get yourself together. You know what preparations are required, and you know how to bring it all together. And that might remind us of the tarot card Temperance. I think the tarot card Temperance is associated with Sagittarius. Have I got that right? And so Temperance is this angelic figure trying to mix something up in a cauldron, bringing everything together, and that's something you can do. But the tarot card is, I think there are sort of bits of thunder as there's some alchemical process is taking place. This is perhaps a little more down to earth here. It's you bringing things together, not just through inspiration, but through just good planning, good organization, making sure that you've got all the resources you need, and doing things in quite a planned and consistent way. Might be a little boring, but it doesn't matter. And you do that, and things do come together. And you also find, Sagittarius, just an opportunity for doing things that you're good at. There are things you're very good at, and if you put energy into them, then things really work. So I do think that it's actually going to be a reasonably good day, and you're helped by the fact that Mercury is continuing to make a sextile to Jupiter. That Mercury sextile Jupiter, it was exact yesterday, but it's still there. It's only a couple of degrees out. 1 degree, one degree orb for that Mercury sextile Jupiter. So that Mercury sextile Jupiter, it allows you to certainly articulate your needs and articulate who you are. And Mercury sextile Jupiter is also very useful just for getting on with people. Like I said yesterday, Mercury sextile Jupiter is a good aspect for relationships. Doesn't matter what the relationship is about. You can get on with people and you can cooperate with them. And I think that, by and large, people are going to like you. Capricorn, moon is in Virgo, sun is in Taurus. Both of sun and the moon are making trine aspects to Capricorn, your sign. So I'm of the opinion that things should work, and you should be able to feel happy and satisfied, and believe you should find that if you put some effort into something, it doesn't need to be very much effort, things really will start to move. And additionally, when it comes to dealing with other people, you can be a force for good. You come over as being a helpful person, and also you have an enthusiasm to you. Okay, it's not a fiery enthusiasm. It's just an enthusiasm that you will take what people say and you will be positive about it. You're not going to be negative for the sake of it. And even when people have their doubts, you can be very reassuring, and you can tell people that things are going to be okay. And additionally, Capricorn, your sense of humor is going to be reasonable. I mean, Capricorn a sign that is associated with humor? I mean, of course, Saturn is a ruler of Capricorn, and traditionally the planet that rules clowns is Saturn. It's certainly not a day when you're going to be a clown, but it does show that there is an inverse to Capricorn. Maybe it's to do with the winter solstice, certainly in the northern hemisphere, and Saturnalia, that things reverse, and your sense of humor can come out in unexpected ways. It might be a dry sense of humor, but it's certainly a sense of humor, and you're able to make light of things which other people might be taking very seriously, too seriously. And so you're able to, I think, make a lot of people happier. So wherever you are, you can actually brighten things up, and you can start to see things in really the best possible light. So given all this, it's not surprising that your connections with other people should work very well. And if you want to get close to anyone, then now might be a great time to do it. Especially if someone is feeling under the weather, or they feel that things aren't going their way. You're just a person to cheer them up, and it's because you're credible. When it comes to cheering people up, it very often isn't credible. People try to be positive for the sake of it, and they come up with pleasantries, but it's not convincing at all, is it? But you are convincing, and you can convincingly demonstrate that things really are going to get better, and people are going to really like you for that. Aquarius, you can see possibilities. You can see possibilities all over the place, and that might make you feel good. That the world is your oyster. But what happens when you actually take a possibility and you actually try to do something with it? Well, what might happen is that you find that it's a little more difficult than expected, and you might have to sort of go through this possibility and work out what you have to do, and then all of a sudden it seems rather complicated, and that might be putting you off. But I wouldn't worry about it. It's good to be in a world of possibilities, and maybe you shouldn't be analysing these possibilities too much right now. Just accept that there are opportunities, and in a couple of days' time, when these opportunities hang around, when you realise they're still there, then you'll have a chance to make the most of them. But if you try to get too close to something, then it might disappear in front of you, and that could be quite dispiriting. So perhaps, Aquarius, any optimism you have should be at a distance, and you shouldn't analyse it too closely. And it's just enough to feel good, without going into the details of how you might be feeling good. And additionally, you might be tempted to get close to another person. I mean, you may be close to someone anyway, but maybe no temptation there. But the Sun is making a semi-square to Neptune. And, with the Sun-Neptune semi-square, it's possible that, some people are really quite confused. They don't entirely know what they're doing, and they may have ideas that are unrealistic, and to make matters worse, they may be unreasonably sure of themselves. That's, Sun in Taurus, semi-square Neptune. Sun in Taurus is another person who really does believe they're in the right, but semi-square Neptune, their belief may be based on absolutely nothing. So don't take people too seriously, and certainly don't take what they say at face value, because some people, they really don't know what they're doing, and they don't know what they're talking about, and you shouldn't hold that against them. That's just the way it is. We've got a Sun-Neptune square at the moment, and it makes things rather difficult to understand. And continuing on this theme of relationships, you just had Sun semi-square Saturn. That was a few days ago, and I did suggest that Sun semi-square Saturn could represent certain difficulties in relationships, and so now the Sun is semi-square Neptune. So we see the thing developing, and there is now a little bit of uncertainty, and perhaps things shouldn't be put to the test. So if there is a potential for uncertainty in relationships, then relationships should be an area that maybe you should keep some distance from, especially, Mars is still moving through Leo, your opposite sign. I don't think Mars moving through Leo is necessarily a problem. Mars in Leo actually demonstrates that someone is there that represents someone who is not going away, someone who may actually be very good for you in the end. But while you have Sun semi-square Neptune, getting too close to anyone may not be such a good idea, especially if you're dealing with someone you don't know very well. Can you really tell what someone is like on a first meeting or a second meeting? Probably not. And so with Sun semi-square Neptune, there is scope there to be disappointed. But this all sort of echoes the general theme of today. Today, you need to keep a little bit of distance. Be optimistic about all those possibilities, and some of those possibilities may be about relationships, and you see that certain people could potentially be useful. They could do you a lot of good. Maybe you could have some kind of relationship with them, but don't put it to the test. Not yet. I don't think that's the right time. So maybe a bit later in the week you can start putting things to the test, but right now just be happy with your good feelings, with your optimism, but an optimism, which you don't try out, because if you try out your optimism, if you try to see if a world is as good as it feels, then you might be disappointed, and that might create a bit of a negative feedback loop, and that's not something that needs to happen. So if you have the right approach, then today should be fine. Pisces, Moon is still in Virgo. Well, it's very much in Virgo now. It doesn't really matter where you are, what your time zone is. Moon is in Virgo. Okay, the Moon might be in Leo very early in the morning, and if you're in New Zealand or Australia, very early in the morning before dawn. But with Moon in Virgo, relationships are something you feel could be important, but I'm not convinced that anything is necessarily going to happen, because the Moon is not making any aspects. Okay, it makes a trine to the Sun, very, very late in the day if you're in the Americas, but I think for most of us, or certainly if you're in Europe, Australia, Asia, that moon trine sun is going to be tomorrow. And so it just may be that other people, they seem to have a lot to offer, but are they going to deliver? Maybe not. But do they need to deliver? Again, I don't think they do. And that might mean that you aren't as constrained as you think you are. You might think that you have to change something because you have to take into account other people. And that might be true in theory, but in practice, I don't think so. And you shouldn't necessarily be relying on anyone. It might feel that they're going to make an appearance, but they might not make an appearance. And so today, you're arguably a lot freer than you think you are. And so do avail yourself of that opportunity. And with the moon starting to make that trine to the sun, it's only starting to make the trine to the sun, I think that your connections with other people may, in many cases, be taking place on actually quite a trivial level, just talking about stuff, but it's not really going anywhere. But that's okay. There's nothing wrong with things that are trivial. Talking about one thing, talking about another thing. There may even be a little bit of gossip, but it's not going anywhere. Likewise, if you feel you want to travel somewhere, short distance, you go there, you're expecting something, but nothing's going to happen. Nothing good's going to happen, and I don't think anything bad is going to happen either. So it may actually be a day that may be not particularly momentous, yet the Sun is making a decile to Jupiter. Sun is 36 degrees from Jupiter. 36 degrees is 1/10 of the circle, so that is a 10th harmonic conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter. And of course Jupiter is you, because Jupiter rules Pisces. And so with Jupiter decile the Sun, there is something that ideally you would like to establish. You want to establish maybe your view, or it could be your identity, and you want to make it clear. And ideally, you want everyone to understand that you have made your position clear. And at the same time, you're wondering, can you do it? Is it possible? Well, with Sun decile Jupiter, it does require a bit of effort. It's not going to be easy. But if you can believe in yourself, then I think you do have the chance to make that position clear. It's one position, but you mustn't get confused. You mustn't overwhelm yourself trying to make yourself clear on many different levels. Decide what is important to you right now, and then give it everything you've got. And you should be looking for a single victory today, not many victories. And in the end, if you put the effort in, everyone's going to understand who you are and what you want. And most importantly, you're going to understand that. Because if you understand that you have a single goal, then that makes things much easier for you, doesn't it? Because it means that you're not going to get distracted. You're not going to try to do too many things at once. And you can sort of set yourself up for success, over the next few days. So, don't allow yourself to go all over the place. And decide what is important. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And it's now time to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 32, duration. Now that is the same hexagram as I got yesterday. So that might indicate that today is a continuation of yesterday. I don't know whether you watched the video for Monday. Certainly if you did watch the video for Monday, you'll feel that continuation. If you didn't watch the video, then we're just maybe just talking about today, because remember, my I Ching readings only apply to people who watch the video. So there could be a continuation here, and duration is very much about continuation. You see things through. You want to see things through to completion, and you just keep going. And there are similarities here. Yesterday we had a lot of moving lines. I think we had the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth line moving. Duration here, we have the second line and the fifth line moving. So we have the same lines moving as yesterday, although not quite so many lines. And so the second line moves, and the second line moving means that we haven't got all the resources we need. We've got the will. We feel we're ready, we're strong enough to see something through to a conclusion, but the actual external world is not necessarily going to be supportive. It's not going to allow us to really see it through. And so it doesn't matter how strong our character is, that might not be quite enough, but that shouldn't worry us. We can't achieve everything at once, and we just have to start somewhere. And if we are aware of, for example, our inadequacies right from the beginning, then that's actually going to put us in a stronger position. When I say inadequacies, well, let me clarify that. It's the inadequacies of resources. There's nothing inadequate about ourselves. We are very adequate. We're adequate to the task. We have the character, but the actual material we're dealing with, the world we're dealing with, may not be sufficiently supportive. And now that might mean we need to get support from elsewhere if we really, want to see something through. So that's the second line, and then the fifth line moves. And the fifth line, I talked about the fifth line yesterday. And the fifth line, is this line which does emphasize gender. It's saying that in terms of duration, it's saying that duration is more of a feminine thing, and that seeing something through to completion and just doing things until they're completed without change is more about the feminine. It's more about the wife, more about the woman, whereas making sudden changes and is not something that the wife should do. That should be something that's up to the husband. Again, that's the I Ching talking. So it's the I Ching does have this hierarchical view, and so maybe we should rephrase this and move away from gender and ask ourselves, are you a leader or are you a follower? And there's nothing wrong with being a leader. There's nothing wrong with being a follower. But is it a situation where you are essentially doing what someone else says? You're following instructions. If you're at work, it could be, you are an employee, you have to listen to a manager. So in that kind of situation, then it is good to just keep going. Followers should follow. Followers should just continue moving. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. On the other hand, if you are a leader, if you are in a position of leadership, then duration may not be the right thing to do. If you're someone who's there to take the initiative and you just keep going in the same old way, then that is not right. You're not doing your job. Your job is to take into account changing circumstances and to make changes. And sometimes if you keep going on with something forever, then it gets absolutely nowhere. So 2 moving lines there, and that does mean that we move to a second hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram 31, which is influence. And influence is a slow hexagram. It's a good hexagram, but it's slow. It's about slowly having an impact. And we shouldn't be in a hurry. We're just slowly getting people to take notice of us, and we're doing the same things, and we're not being pushy, and we are creating action. But we're not creating action in a particularly dynamic and obvious way, but action is starting. And perhaps if we look at the whole thing, from duration to influence, to begin with, things weren't moving. We didn't feel we were up to it. We didn't have the resources. We had the character, but character alone can't achieve much. We do need to have the opportunities. But if we keep moving, then slowly we're starting to have an impact. And again, how we have an impact may depend on whether we're a leader or a follower. If we are a follower, we can just keep going, and what we're doing does actually have an influence. And yeah, if we follow, if we're a leader, then we have an opportunity to be noticed. So it's a day which is not necessarily but especially exciting, but if we keep going and we understand our role, whether it's a leader or a follower, and we act according to that role. So if we are a leader, that does make things a little more complicated, because we may have to change our strategy, and we may have to take it upon ourselves to make a change. But so that is complicated, and that shows that actually sometimes there are distinct advantages in being a follower rather than a leader. But in the end, people understand us, and we do start making an impact. And so it's time to switch back to the astrology. And I wanted to talk to begin with about some of the things going on today. And this Sun semisquare Neptune. If you look at the Sun semisquare Neptune, let me show you this Sun semisquare Neptune. So okay, I don't need to have a special chart for Sun semisquare Neptune, but there is a Sun and there is Neptune. Let me just put Aries on the left. Okay, there's Neptune, and there's the Sun. So the Sun and Neptune, 45 degrees apart. And I do think that this is an important aspect. 45 degrees, as far as I'm concerned, it is a dynamic contact. And Sun in Taurus, we like things to be straightforward. We want things to be simple. And we want to understand things. We want things to be grounded. Yesterday I talked about the fact that 15 degrees Taurus, you could argue, is the most stable degree of all the 360. It's of all the 360 degrees. It is about stability. It's completely fixed. It's a fixed sign, and it's right in the middle of a fixed sign, and it's a fixed earth sign. But Neptune, semisquare the Sun in Taurus, it's undermining it. And however hard we try to make things straightforward, to have both feet on the ground, things really do undermine it. And so this may say something about what's happening around us, how people are behaving, and people may be behaving in an erratic way, or they just might not be certain of themselves. And additionally, we've got Mercury right in the middle of that Sun-Neptune, conjunction. So we've got, and Mercury is making a 16th harmonic aspect. It's 22.5 degrees, which is half of 45. So Mercury, that says something about the way people are thinking and how people are thinking. And if you look at Eberton and Witter, they are not positive about Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. So if I read you what Witter says about Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, he's not positive at all about it. He says Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, he says, poor memory, daydreaming, a receptive mind, not being fully awake, mental defects, the feeling of mental ecstasy, to be confused about the personal sphere of life. So We don't know what we're doing, even undermining the intellect, and that seems to be a little bit unfair. But it does remind us that we shouldn't take what people say at face value. And some people may be making poor decisions today, but there is another way of looking at it. If you've got Mercury on a Sun-Neptune midpoint, you might say that you're aware of other things, and you can actually use this awareness in a productive way. Perhaps you have a certain sensitivity. And then as for Ebertin says about Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. Again, he's not very positive either. He says little intelligence, a lack of logical thinking, only a small measure of objectivity, false logic or speech defect, mental disturbances, nerve weakness, deceptions or illusions. And so it's kind of more of the same. And it may be that people today are temporarily not particularly intelligent. Or is it because we've all got three bottle caps of plastic in our brain? I think, who was I talking to? I was talking to, when I was talking to Geminis, I was mentioning that. Apparently all of us have three bottle caps in our brains because of all these microplastics. And if you add them all up, 3 bottle caps. I do find that amazing. And maybe with Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, this is really emphasizing his point that people are not very clever. And we perhaps realize that people are not as clever as they used to be. But don't trust me. I mean, Mercury is on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, so that's going to affect me as well. So me, the astrologer, with Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, you probably shouldn't believe a word I say. And if we look at this as on the viewpoint of the 90-degree dial, just to emphasize my point, so a 22.5 degree, so on a 90-degree dial, a conjunction, a square, and an opposition are represented as a conjunction. A semisquare and a SSQ quadrate are represented as an opposition, and a 22.5 degree aspect is represented as a square. And so you'll be able to see what I mean when I put the 90-degree dial up. So there is the Sun square Neptune. So if we put the pointer on the Sun, then there is the Sun Neptune. There's a Sun-Neptune opposition because they're 45 degrees apart, so that's what it's showing. And then there is Mercury. Mercury is making a 22.5 degree aspect to Mercury, to Neptune, and a 22.5 degree aspect of the Sun. And so, we see it as a square. In fact, you could say that on the fourth harmonic, we've sort of got a bit of a grand cross here if we throw in the moon, but I don't want to go down that road. It just makes it a little bit confusing. So if we look at Mercury, we put Mercury on the dial. There's Mercury, and it's on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, and that is just talking about the fact that today is confusing. Today is confusing, and people are going to make bad decisions. I think that is very likely, and so that is a good reason why all of us should avoid making decisions, and we should really check our facts because there is the potential here for making mistakes. And I want to finish by looking at a few examples of people with Sun semisquare Neptune, and also I wanted to look at Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, as examples. So if you want to have an example of someone who by and large has been quite successful, who has Sun semisquare Neptune, is Martha Stewart. I don't know a great deal about Martha Stewart, but she is sort of household guru, isn't she? Telling people how to set tables and make food. And so she has Sun semisquare Neptune. So how would we see this? Well, obviously she's got Sun in Leo. She has a high opinion of herself. And semisquare Neptune. Now, that semisquare Neptune in Virgo. So Neptune was in Virgo in 1940. She was born on August the 3rd, 1941. So you could say that Neptune in Virgo is representative of detail. It's trying to transcend through getting everything right. Now, there are different aspects, different ways in which Neptune in Virgo work, because Neptune went into Virgo at the time of the Wall Street crash in 1929. That was so that's part of Neptune in Virgo. But this is looking at it in a different way. So Neptune in Virgo, she's perhaps picking up on this. People want to get things right. Neptune is about service. It's about preparing food. It is about setting tables. And so you could say in her case, she's able to incorporate that Neptune in Virgo in terms of the way she is her Sun in Leo. Though occasionally she makes mistakes, or she made mistakes, like she did end up in prison. She had a brief stint in prison, I think, for insider trading. She heard some news about some shares she owned and she sold them. I think that's how it worked, and she ended up in prison because of that. And so that might be Sun semisquare Neptune. It might be a momentary lapse of judgment, but in her case that doesn't seem to take away from her overall success, and probably her time in prison gives her even greater sort of hinterland and credibility. So that's one person who had Sun semisquare Neptune. The Emperor Nero had Sun semisquare Neptune. So we have his date of birth. Nero was a Sagittarius, so there is I don't know his time of birth, but Nero had Sun semisquare Neptune, and that may say something about a man who is confused, and became more confused as he became emperor. I mean, apparently his first 5 years as emperor was great. What do they call it? Something like the what's the Latin word? The first 5 years, I can't remember what it was in Latin, but the first 5 years, Quinquennium Neronis or something like that. The first 5 years of Nero were considered to be great. Everything was working. It seemed to be a good change after Claudius, and then things went to pieces. And so Sun Neptune, he did things like entered musical competitions, and for the emperor, this was not considered to be very dignified for the emperor to enter a musical competition. You'd associate music and playing musical instruments as something that slaves might do, not the emperor of Rome. And so that might be his Sun semisquare Neptune, and then just losing touch with the whole thing. And of course he committed suicide. Was it AD 68? I think that's when and so it didn't work in the end tremendously well for Nero. And talking about people who have or had a lot of control, the former president of South Korea, who had ideas that he could have martial law, then don't have a time of birth for Yoon Suk Yeol, but he had Sun semisquare Neptune. And I think perhaps we can see in the end his undoing. So he like Nero had Sun semisquare Neptune, and perhaps didn't really understand the nature of the country or the nation he was ruling. And then the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has Sun semisquare Neptune. Again, no time of birth, but what is he up to? That might be a question of Sun semisquare Neptune. It might be about an agenda. He has a particular agenda for London, but where's it all going? And he somehow manages to get away with it. Maybe he's tuned into the collective in the same way that well, Martha Stewart was able to use that Sun semisquare Neptune to understand what Neptune was about. Somehow Sadiq Khan, he stays as mayor. He's just recently won a mayoral election. Was that last year? I can't remember. But in many sectors of British society, he's not especially popular. But he does have Sun semisquare Neptune, and Sun semisquare Neptune events. Two events took place when Sun was semisquare Neptune. The declaration of Palestine in Algiers on November the 15th, 1988. Sun was square Neptune. I mean, not exactly square Neptune, but Sun square Neptune is an ideal. That's one way in which you can see Sun semisquare Neptune. And Sun square Neptune can be about martyrdom and sacrifice, and so victimhood as well. And so this could be the very nature of Sun semisquare Neptune in Palestine's chart. I mean, it's arguably not especially desirable to have Sun semisquare Neptune, but Palestine has its own problems, and so that Sun square Neptune, martyrdom, suffering, and trying your hardest to get something done and it doesn't happen. And Sun square Neptune is also about religion and religious fanaticism. So it's all hard coded into Palestine's chart, except for November the 15th, 1988. And it's probably not a good time to start things with Sun semisquare Neptune. Jimmy Carter was inaugurated when the Sun was semisquare Neptune, and there's a Sun and there is Neptune. So this was the start of Jimmy Carter becoming president in 1977. It was not a successful presidency. It was a one-term presidency. He had issues with the economy, with inflation, and in the end, he also had the Iran hostage crisis. So things really didn't work well for him, and perhaps the Carter regime, was perhaps too idealistic. I mean, that is a criticism of Carter, that he was too focused on human rights and not really looking at the real issues. I mean, he should have been a bit more hard-nosed when you're talking about Iran. Forget about human rights in Iran. The role is to keep Iran in power, keep the Shah there, if he can. And so the whole management of Iran was a bit of a disaster. And so that might be reflected by his Sun semisquare Neptune. And in the end, it was a presidency that failed. Jimmy Carter was a nice person, but that doesn't mean to say that he was a good president. And perhaps he was naive. Perhaps that naivety is linked to that Sun semisquare Neptune, and so that may say something about his regime. And I now want to turn to the what it means for Mercury to be on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. And examples of events taking place when Mercury is on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. Well, in fact, Carter inauguration. The Carter inauguration had Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, and this Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, may say something about what the Carter regime was. It was idealistic, but there was a certain weakness there, and it wasn't particularly strong-minded, and maybe some key decisions were made which didn't work out. Or, for example, the planning of the rescue of the hostages with that helicopter that went in, and it was a complete disaster. People were killed, and it was a major embarrassment for America and for the Carter regime. So you think about the planning that goes into that, and it just didn't work out. And so that was one of the real low points in the Carter regime, that attempt to rescue the hostages. And here is a regime that had Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. And Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint can also be linked with, bad events. So the Kenosha shooting. So the Kenosha shooting it happened in 2020, and so there was this young man, Kyle Ritterhouse, and he said he went to this town of Kenosha because there was looting and he wanted to protect some shops. I mean, he was pretty young when this happened, and he said he was attacked and he opened fire and he was tried for murder, but he was acquitted. And so the Kenosha shooting, this very chaotic event with looting and guns and gunfire and people getting killed, this took place when Mercury was square the Sun-Neptune midpoint. You see, there's Sun and there's Neptune, so the Sun-Neptune midpoint around sort of 11 Gemini, and so Mercury was square that. I think even the ascendant is on the Mercury and the ascendant were on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. So that does indicate that Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint can perhaps be a little dangerous, and one can look at another example of a shooting which took place. I mean, quite an infamous shooting, and that would be the Kent State shooting, when in Kent State in Ohio, when people were protesting against, I think, Vietnam, and they sent in the National Guard, and students were shot. And again, Mercury is on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, so there are guns and misunderstandings, and people the National Guard misunderstanding the situation and acting in a way which is really inappropriate. And so that can perhaps explain why the shooting happened at Kent State. Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, and Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, it can be quite devious. For example, here is a chart for the destruction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. This is when probably the Americans blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline in the Baltic. This pipeline that was supplying Germany with fuel from Russia. So the Americans blew it up or probably blew it up. Okay, some say it was the Ukrainians, but were the Ukrainians really able to manage that? I suspect it was the Americans that did it. And so they did this thing on, I think, September 26, 2022, 2:03 a.m. And so there is Mercury, there's Sun and Neptune. So Mercury is square the Sun-Neptune midpoint. So that's that is another way in which this can work. And continuing on the theme of Russia, then you might think of there was the Beslan massacre in 2004, when I think Chechen terrorists, they went into this school, and a lot of children and teachers, and of course the terrorists themselves, were killed. And this happened with Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. So there's Mercury there's the Sun. Where's Neptune gone? There's Sun and Neptune, and if you work it through, you'll find that Mercury is, I think, square the Sun-Neptune midpoint. So you get the idea with Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. And so with Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint at the moment, if you are involved with guns, or if there's civil disturbance, guns, it's not a good mix. People may there may be a complicated situation, and people who should know better make bad decisions, and they make bad decisions potentially with catastrophic results. And there is an organization I'm living in the city of Lakewood in Washington State, and Lakewood it was incorporated as a city with Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. So there's Mercury, and it's exactly on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. So what does that mean for a city? Well, you could have, this could be that, a lot of people in Lakewood, they thought incorporating as a city was something good. It was going to make things better for the city. And in fact, if you actually look at what's happening in Lakewood, as far as I know, it's basically been in decline ever since it became incorporated as a city. So it was not a great thing for Lakewood. The environment has been degraded, the quality of life has been degraded, the school system has, used to have a very good school system, so everything has been declining since incorporation. Now that might just be something going on, the first few decades of the 20th century, and it's also about how the city communicates. The city in Lakewood, they always like to say that things are great, but things are getting better as things are getting worse, and so communication and trying to create an impression, and how, probably every American city does this, but Lakewood seems to be particularly bad at this. And so Mercury, is on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. So if you're a city who has Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, you may be attracting people who also have Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. And I think I've got this chart right, but the mayor of Lakewood is a man called Jason Whalen, and I think I believe he's a Republican. Not that it really makes much difference, because in Lakewood the Republicans and the Democrats are pretty much the same as far as I could see. But Jason Whalen, the mayor of Lakewood, here is his chart, and so he has Mercury square his Sun-Neptune midpoint. And Jason Whalen, his communication style, he comes over as being very concerned, and he really does seem concerned. You sit him and his face looks really concerned as he listens to people, and all the while he's just presenting the city's view. And he says, "Oh, well, we can't do anything about that. Well, we have to build houses here because we've got some state mandate, and so on and so on." There's always a reason why, and that could be the fact that he sounds convincing, but at the same time he's presenting the city's viewpoint, because as far as I can see in Lakewood, the role of the city council is just to present what the city, presents the city's agenda to the public. At least that's how I see it. And so it's interesting that Mercury on a Sun-Neptune city has, I believe, got a mayor who has also got Mercury on a Sun-Neptune midpoint himself. I think I've got his time right, but I may be wrong there. And a couple of people who have Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. Well, I'm sort of running out of time. Someone that comes to mind is Elizabeth Holmes. So remember Elizabeth Holmes? Kemi Badenoch, actually. She has Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. So as I've got her chart up there, you see she's got Mercury exactly on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. Now, she comes over as being a tough person. I don't want to sort of jump on the bandwagon. Everyone in Britain is saying, "Oh, she's doomed. She can't stay on as leader. She's done a hopeless job of it." I don't want to jump on that bandwagon. I think her chart does have some merit, but I don't have a time of birth for her. But she does have Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, and she may jump to conclusions with Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, and that can be a problem. She, I think, accused she accused the Reform Party of sort of misrepresenting their membership figures, and she just did it without any evidence, and it was shown that her allegation was wrong, and so she might be tempted to jump to conclusions. And if you're going to be leader of the opposition, you need to be very clear in terms of the way you communicate. So far, her performance in Prime Minister's Question Time has not been great. I mean, she's had her moments, but maybe that Mercury on the Sun-Neptune conjunction is not working in her favor. She is trying to present the Conservative Party's position, and so far it's said that she's not doing a good job on it. I mean, it is said. I mean, I don't know. I'm not entirely convinced that Kemi Badenoch is a complete disaster as yet, even though everyone is saying she's a disaster, and I don't have a time of birth, but she does have Mercury on a Sun-Neptune conjunction, which if you're in the UK, you might find that is of interest. And someone else with Mercury on a Sun-Neptune midpoint, who was in the news quite recently, is Elizabeth Holmes. And so Elizabeth Holmes, she was, I can't remember what's the name of that company, the company that had this blood testing machine which didn't work. And she was able to persuade people, investors, to come in with millions and millions of dollars. And she was absolutely convinced of herself that she had it. And there's her Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, conjunct the Sun-Neptune midpoint. And so you can see this on many levels, the way she changed her voice in order to create a particular impression, the way she was able to convince investors, and she was perhaps even able to convince herself. And so Mercury on a Sun-Neptune midpoint can be not just about deluding other people, but also can be about self-delusion as well. So I think Elizabeth Holmes might actually be a very good example of someone who does have Mercury conjunct the Sun-Neptune midpoint. So that's it. That's all I'm going to say on the subject of Sun semisquare Neptune, Mercury on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. I hope you found this video to be of some value. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be extremely grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.